That's right.
Oh,
But Granddaddy was
Try something.
58 when he started. Maybe that means I made it past. Because he died when he was my age. Like he'd had it for 10 years. By the time he died, and she was 94.
We're playing with the camera.
This week, about 3 sisters in western Kansas. The youngest one of them just turned 100.
See how that works. We've got the nativity scene set up, so I want people to see that.
Well, she was too, and we could remember.
There we go.
Literally what happened 5 minutes ago and 100 years ago. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Still lived in her own home. Yeah, these 3 sisters do too, I think. Oh, they either.
Did you all get the wind out in Iowa?
Assisted living place, I'm not sure. Or they might all live in their own homes.
Didn't. We got wind. It was quite windy, but nothing damaging other than blowing some decorations around.
So you didn't get tornadoed? Is that the
No
upshot?
tornado. It sounds devastating to us. They say one tornado would be on the ground for almost 200 miles.
Unbelievable.
Sounds like the derecho. Morning, Dale Doro.
Oh, it's scary.
Jody's sister Chris yesterday said that roof that came off of that Amazon building
Yes.
was 20 minutes from their house.
Oh,
And I saw a mess in Bowling Green this morning. So it sure hit several areas around where we knew people.
You know, I'm reminded of how when things go wrong with a marriage, little children often feel as though it's their fault. And I'm standing around in the middle of some series of catastrophes, sometimes wondering, what did I do?
Yeah.
You know, is this all about our bad environmental, or is this just one of those things?
Tornadoes in December are possible. I've
They are.
read the history of them,
But
and
they're very unlikely, and for one, it's bad.
unlikely, but there have been
Good morning. Got into my co-pilot this morning. I got all the lights green and somebody was in front of me speeding and I just thought the pedal on. And why do we call God He?
I don't know any better.
Oh, there's probably the best answer. Don't know any better.
I think so, we see it, we're probably. Yeah, the owl can still see me.
Can it?
Yep.
Okay.
Where's Nancy?
Well, we had a family reunion yesterday in Ohio, so we
Oh,
went over on Friday and got back yesterday afternoon, and she's done in.
Hi, Dan, how are you?
I'm well-ish. Had all the tests required to see if I qualify for a drug trial. And I should hear tomorrow.
to see you as always.
Well, at Wellesley Friends, we prayed for you the last week.
Thank you for your sweet.
Thank you.
Yes.
You've been in my prayers a lot.
Now,
Thank
you.
Yes, and I appreciate what you did very smoothly.
Yeah, it made it work.
amazing.
We're a good team.
How come you're doing dishes and I volunteer to do dishes? I don't mind doing dishes.
We're talking about why do we call God He? Many of you have read The Shack. The came out what, 15 years ago or more? the shack, and Dan and I have listened a couple times to a podcast interviewing the author about his reasoning behind portraying the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit the way he did in the shack, and it's really quite interesting. I recommend if you want to find it, or help you find it. It's very powerful.
Tried to avoid that language and the stuff I've been writing, over the last 20 some years, to be more inclusive or neutral in some of that, but it's easier said than done sometimes, especially if you're trying to play off of others.
Can't hear you real well, Dale.
Okay, my picture just went blank, so. Oh, there everybody is. I just said I've tried to avoid that language in my writing, but then I've been working with women, and of course that's natural language in that era, so I don't change quotes usually. But I do try to avoid that if I'm doing something more more modern.
Yeah.
Morning, Steve. Did you get your crops out of the field yet completely?
We got about 90 acres left.
Is it dry enough now to get back in there this coming week?
We'll probably try about Tuesday or Wednesday. We had rain last Sunday. We had rain Thursday.
Have you been?
Remind me what you're
successful?
harvesting right now?
Field corn.
I'm sure you told me, but how does field corn vary from other corn?
Sweet corn is soft. If it's picked at the right time, it's for human consumption. Field corn is mostly used for livestock feed and ethanol production.
Ah,
And popcorn is different yet.
ooh, popcorn I like.
That's Sunday night food.
Lauren, we can't hear you. You are muted.
You have to,
We're rooting for you. You can do it.
Did you ever grow popcorn, Steve?
I have not.
But Grandfather Barnett did.
And Grandpa Westerfield did too, a lot.
Yeah.
Whole family got together to sell the popcorn. Sunday night food. Yep.
Couldn't let Colonel Redenbecker have all the fun, huh?
Norma has
Nothing on Grandpa.
Norma has our prelude ready. It's a little longer than usual, so we'll do joys and concerns when that's done. As far as announcements, the only one I have is that next Sunday we will have monthly meeting where we'll have the budget and some other short business. In joys and concerns, one that I will share that some of you may have heard and some may have not, but Kay Record Carter's youngest sister Ellen was killed in a car wreck towards the end of last week. I don't have any details about services or anything. Did
Peggy Hollingsworth said that there would be something private now and maybe a more public sort of thing later, but that was all that she knew a couple of days ago.
did you all hear that from Lynn?
Yes.
So as soon as I hear, I'll post it when we know something.
I got an email from Peggy Hollingsworth last evening that had a whole string of USFW related sad stories. Some of you know Liz Nylander, who is a member of First Friends Kokomo and has been involved with USFW for a long time. She and her fiance have both had COVID this past week or so, and he passed away yesterday. So she will be needing our thoughts and prayers. And there are some others that I'll email to people. They're about people that none of the rest of us know. Well, I will say too, Ruth Albert called me this week and said they had a COVID outbreak at West Side and they're not allowing outside people to come in and they have to wear masks when they leave their rooms. Lauren, you may be able to tell more than that, but at any rate, that meant that we cannot go there for USFW, so we've decided not to have USFW this coming week because of that. But I'm sure Ruth and all the people there could use our thoughts and prayers too.
But we had a lovely worship service last week, thanks in no small part to Norma's organizational skills and bringing it together. So for those of you who weren't able to attend in person or online, it is available on the YouTube channel. It's been very popular on YouTube so far, so that's nice. It was as always a wonderful time to get together and with the Valley Mills folks as well. Dan Beane is going to be our worship leader this morning, so I invite you to put yourselves on mute if you would, so that there's not a lot of any interference, and Dan will lead forth as he feels led from this point on.
Good morning, friends. I want to thank Norma for that music. It reminded me that was the processional for Sylvia and my wedding just a year ago. So that was a pleasant memory. Today, I want to share some lessons I learned during my recent visits to refugee camps in Kenya and Zimbabwe. I'll read some scriptures from the Old and the New Testaments, calling for us to care for refugees. I will tell stories about refugees and finally share how we can respond to the growing worldwide refugee situation. Our Judeo-Christian heritage is replete with biblical injunctions to care for the hungry, the widows, the strangers, those in prison, and even more. And I'm sure all of us have read Matthew 25, 31 to 46, where Jesus tells the story of the king separating the people. He said it was much like separating the sheep from the goats. Picking the story up from verse 34, we read, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom of heaven prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me.'" As we go on to the verses that follow, the people asked, well, when did they ever see the king in need? And reading from verse 40, the reply is, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Refugees certainly qualify as people who are hungry and thirsty, needing clothing, health care, and a place to live. To gain an understanding of the refugee situation in the world, I recently made 2 trips to Africa to visit refugee camps. The first visit was to Kakuma refugee camp in northwestern Kenya. With its 184,000 refugees, it is said to be the largest refugee camp in the world. On 2 consecutive years, I went to the smaller Tongagora refugee camp with around 10,000 refugees in southeastern Zimbabwe. To help understand the plight of refugees, I want to tell you some stories of the people I visited. The first story is about Rashidi, who was a doctor in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is the name of a large country in Central Africa, and usually we shorten the name to the DRC. Rashidi was an anesthesiologist in the eastern part of the DRC. Now, for many decades, there's been almost constant armed conflict between the various governments and the many rebel groups active in that country. One day, a rebel group attacked the town Rashidi was working in. They came to the hospital where he worked and gathered the doctors together and demanded that those doctors now work for and support the rebels. The doctors refused, so several of them were shot right on that spot. Rashidi and another doctor were locked in a room while the rebels went off to deal with other issues. They knocked a hole in the ceiling and they crawled out and escaped. He ran to his home to find that the rebels had beaten his pregnant wife until she was unconscious. He revived her, collected his 5 children, and somehow they fled to another town. Now, this town was in a different tribal area, and there he was accused of being a rebel, as they had just arrived from a rebel-held territory. So they fled on further. Over the next days, they could find no welcoming town, so finally they found a boat to take them across Lake Tanganyika into Tanzania. From there, they all crowded into the sleeper cab of a semi going to Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, they made it to the Tongagora refugee camp, which houses over 10,000 people in the far southeast of the country. They were registered into the camp with 2 forms of biometric identification, fingerprints and iris recognition. All of their vital information was entered into the camp's computerized record system. Upon arrival, many new refugees are housed in tents. Eventually, Rashidi and his family were assigned a 70-foot by 70-foot plot on a piece of land. They were given a wooden door, 3 windows, wooden rafters, and corrugated metal for a roof. Then they dug a pit, mixed up mud, and made sun-dried mud bricks to build a house with 3 10-by-10 rooms. A latrine was erected between every second house, so 2 families shared in using it. The children were entered into the school system, where the primary school had classes of up to 100 students with 1 teacher. And the secondary school had classes of 50 or 60 with 2 or 3 students sitting at every desk. Once a month, food was distributed to the refugees. On food distribution days, 1 member of each family brought their registration card, which was checked off against a computerized list of refugees. The card indicated how many people are in each family, which determined the amount of food they were to be given. Corn, beans, rice, dried fish, and cooking oil were measured out in bags or baskets or bottles, which the refugees brought with them. While the goal is 2,100 calories per day for each refugee, often it is much less if there is not enough food in the warehouse. Sometimes money is distributed rather than food, which is an effort to support the surrounding local people who then sell to the refugees. When the money is distributed instead of food, each man, woman, and child receives 13 American dollars, which is calculated to buy them enough calories for a month. There are occasional clothing distribution days when used clothing from Europe and North America is passed out. I was surprised that most of the refugees seemed to be well dressed, especially when they came to church. Refugee camps are organized by the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, which has the acronym UNHCR. In the refugee camp, Rashidi and his family found the services were provided by 10 non-governmental organizations under the guidance of the UNHCR. The United Nations has almost no actual presence in the camp beyond the assistant camp administrator. They discovered that the World Food Program distributes the food. The Jesuit Refugee Services provides the high school and adult education. The Italian organization called Terra de Home provides the primary school, the daycare, and the health clinic. Other support came from church groups, from the USAID, from China Aid, and several Scandinavian and European countries. They found many churches in the camp, and Rashidi quickly became a leader in the Catholic Church. After 2 years, Rashidi's wife and children left the camp and went to Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. There, they somehow found a 1-room apartment and put the older children in what they considered a better school. Currently, the entire family is living in the capital city. After his near-death experience back in the DRC, and with reports of continued bloodshed there, Rashidi never wants to return. Now their focus is on being resettled in a host country. They have completed the first steps and interviews required to be resettled in a host country, with the United States being their preference. The family is now in a holding pattern, waiting for the time they can be resettled. During the past administration in Washington, the number of refugees allowed into the United States was drastically cut back. That, combined with the COVID pandemic, almost stopped resettlement. And now the new Omicron variant has temporarily closed our borders to people from Southern Africa. I hope Rashidi's story gives you a little taste of why people are refugees and what life is like in the refugee camp. Camps are different in each country. Some are only tents, while in some of the Southern European countries, there are more permanent buildings to deal with the cold winters. As we share about refugees, while we are approaching the celebration of the birth of Jesus, we are reminded that Joseph and Mary and the baby Jesus were refugees when they fled to Egypt for some time. Both the Old Testament and the New Testament are very clear about the responsibility we have for strangers and homeless people. Exodus 23:9 states, "Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners because you were foreigners in Egypt." While in Leviticus 23, verse 22, we can read, "When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you." Hospitality is held up as a mark of those who follow Jesus. In Hebrews 13:2, Paul wrote, "Do not forget to show hospitality to the strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." The numbers of refugees in the world is staggering. In mid-2021, there were 26 million refugees who had fled their countries. By the middle of this year, the largest number of refugees from one country were the 6.8 million refugees who had fled from the brutal war in Syria. There are over 5 million refugees from Venezuela, 2.8 million from Afghanistan, 2.2 million from South Sudan, and the list goes on and on. Another surprising statistic is the countries that are hosting the largest numbers of refugees. Turkey has taken in 3.7 million refugees. Colombia has taken in 1.7 million refugees. Uganda, 1.5 million. Pakistan, 1.4 million. Did you notice the names of the host countries? Turkey, Colombia, Uganda, Pakistan. These are not wealthy countries. The United States and Western Europe, with the exception of Sweden, are very low on the list of countries that host refugees. From the early pages of the Bible and on through the New Testament, believers are encouraged to care for people like refugees, with verses like Leviticus 19:34, which reads, "Foreigners residing among you must be treated as native born. Love them as yourself, for you are foreigners in Egypt." So the question arises, how do we help refugees? One way is to encourage governments to grant asylum to refugees. Another step is to encourage governments to participate in the resettlement of refugees. We can financially support organizations like World Vision, Jesuit Refugee Service, and hundreds of others providing assistance to refugees. We all need to become aware and knowledgeable about refugee situations, and we can organize the welcome of refugees to our community and see that they are provided with housing, furniture for the home, clothing, transportation, language training, and jobs. And of course, we can pray for the refugees and pray for guidance, how we can be the hands of God in serving these desperate people. Let me close with a couple more brief stories of refugees in the Tongagora refugee camp. I met and still correspond with a young woman nicknamed Princess. She was 1 year old when her family fled from the violence of the DRC and came to the Tongagora refugee camp. She was a very bright student and was able to finish high school. The Jesuit Refugee Service paid for 2 years of junior college for her outside of the camp. She's now 21, so she has been in the camp for 20 years. There are hundreds of young people in the camps who know nothing else, and I often wonder, what is their future? In July, she wrote that her family was told they would be resettled in the USA by October. So they bought suitcases, went to Harare for the required checkups to be sure they were not carrying diseases such as tuberculosis or AIDS, and they waited. October came and went, and they were still there. They were told that their family was too large and smaller families had been chosen. Just 2 weeks ago, they were again called back to upgrade their medical exams in preparation for departure. But now it appears that the new Omicron variant of the COVID virus has closed the doors of the United States to anyone from Southern Africa. So her life has been a yo-yo of excitement at the prospect of leaving the camp and depression when that prospect evaporates. 20 years is a long time to be in a refugee camp, but in Palestine, there are refugees who have been there in the camp since they were driven from their homes by the Israelis in 1948. That's over 70 years of waiting to be returned to their property, which had been seized by Israel. People in the refugee camps often seem to have their lives on hold. So you might wonder, what do they do all day? The daily tasks of surviving include finding firewood, taking buckets to the scattered water pipes, and standing in long lines to collect the water to be carried home. Children go to school. Families in Tongagora can grow vegetables on plots allocated to them in the community gardens. Churches are full, with people even standing outside looking in the windows. Church choir competitions are a favorite pastime, and some refugees start small businesses. This morning, we have looked at the biblical call to reach out to those in need. We've shared refugee stories and heard the statistics on the mammoth refugee problem. My prayer is that all our hearts may be open to fulfill Jesus' call to care for the stranger.
Thank you, Dan, for your message. One we needed to hear at this time of year and probably throughout the year. We'll now move into a time of unprogrammed worship. All are invited to stay. For those who need to leave, blessings, and we hope to see you next week.
Thank you, Dan. I really enjoyed your message.
Thank you.
You, Dan. It was very insightful. I appreciated it.
We live in this wonderful country that's very rich. And what are we doing about migrants? We build a wall and we separate the children and put the children in cages. There's something really wrong. And if God's keeping score, I think that's a strike against us.
A few years ago, I reconnected in person with a longtime friend of mine I hadn't seen in years, Bill Roman. He was a Lutheran pastor And we were talking about various things, but one thing we were talking about was prophetic messages. And he said one hallmark of what he considered a truly good sermon was that there were 3 whats. The first one is what? And the next is so what? And then the third is now what? And as I listened to Dan today, I thought he hit all 3 of those. I mean, we all know that there are refugees, but we got enlightenment about just how deep this is. And so what? He personalized it with people's stories, and it tendered my heart and got to the point of, okay, now what? And I thought, well, we can't sit here and go, well, we donated money out the Carroll Mills Fund for the refugees in Camp Atterbury, and most of them are now being resettled, and now Exodus is going to help them with some of the money, and so we've done our job. There's so much more still to do, and I was thinking, I hope that as we move forward as a community of faith, we look at our budget again and say, well, what else might we add that proclaims this witness? What? So what? Now what? we come to the close of our time together, are there any closing words or thoughts friends would like to share?
I just want to say thank you, Dan. Very thought-provoking message. It's always helpful to have a face and a story to go with those overwhelming numbers about refugees. I really appreciate your sharing this morning.
Thank you.
Oh, he has lots more stories. We asked Norma to play at the end, "Come Thou Long Expected Jesus." And I think when we first asked her, at least I did, felt like that was a prayer for the refugee. Come free our lives from being refugees and being always oppressed and unwelcome to open us to a new life. But I'm thinking more now that it means come thou long expected Jesus to my heart, to free up my assumptions, my prejudices, my fears, and my ignorance of what to do to help welcome the stranger wherever they are. Come, Jesus, as well.
Well, it was good to be with you all. Blessings on this coming week. And we hope to see you next Sunday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.